Good afternoon, Switzerland. Hello. I'm so excited. I have 3 posters that I'm finishing today that are 3x4. They need to be printed 3 foot by 4 foot, and I'm going to spend a couple hours today in the Vision Pro with just a giant Illustrator window. I'm so excited. Like when you're like, I'm going to look at this and see what does it really look like at 3 foot by 4 foot. And I tried to do that with the TV, but the display wasn't sharp enough for to resolve some of the smaller details. So I was like, well, is it really going to be this fuzzy? Am I going to be able to read this fine print text? It doesn't need to shout at you, but it's a diagram, so make it float.
Now you just have to buy those Vision Pros for everybody in the audience.
Well, I'm going to print it.
You should have been there in the early days when you never really knew until it came back from the Linotronic run how sharp things were. Before that on screens, none of the screens showed what the reality was.
When I worked on when I was the photo head for my yearbook to do all the developing of all the thing, and every page of the yearbook when you're putting it says reproduction will not improve the quality of your images. It was just like they just wanted to keep on telling these high school students, I know you're doing all this work. Do not think that it's going to get better when we print it.
Early hands help. Appreciate it, everyone. Raise them up. Thanks for being here, everyone. Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Alexander, what's our first one today?
Our first question is coming from Marco Richlich in Zurich, Switzerland. As we know, ATEMs have a limited device count for IP connections. Is there still not a workaround for that?
Alex?
It's actually pretty unusual for a switcher to be able to take 5 connections at one time. It's usually not something you want to do very often, is to have more than 5 computers attached to your switcher at any given time. So I don't recommend going over that for any switcher at in any way. So that, figure out who's got to control the ATEM and then have them control it. But I wouldn't increase the number of IP connections. But I believe the maximum number of stable IP connections is 5 to the ATEM. I don't even know if that's published, but I think that is the kind of understood number. It's not that you can't have more than 5 connect. It's just that we've seen a variety of idiosyncrasies once you go over 5.
And then Mickey in the chat chimes in and says you can use a tool to interface with the ATEMs like ATEM OSC, Mix Effector. Craig Kadoki even suggested Companion to basically act as the abstraction layer. So you would have multiple things that are controlling Companion or OSC or Mix Effect, and then that is a single point that's going into the ATEM. You might have a little bit more stability there. Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Do you think we'll see G2 versions of the rest of the ATEM Mini range?
Go ahead, Alexander.
Maybe. And I say that it really depends. I mean, of course, there's going to be a refresh. They're not going to keep the same exact product line for the next 5 years. What exactly ends up in those ATEMs, I think, is going to depend on which model we're talking about. I think more or less the base, the cheapest one. I think Blackmagic wants to keep these things to a certain price point to appeal to people that have very simple, basic needs. I'm not saying they won't get an update, but I don't think you're going to see pro-level features like MADI multi-channel audio. I don't think you're going to see the CF Express storage recording option on the lesser models there. Probably on the higher ends like the Extreme and the Extreme ISO. They may put that in there, but that's just my guess. I think they want to keep those entry-level ones to a certain price point.
Alex?
The good news is that they realized that we don't want all those buttons. So the first ones that we saw were cleaned up a little bit from an interface perspective. They did add a couple things that I think that the new G2 of the Extreme is a really great update for where we were hoping to go with those. The funny thing about MADI is that it cost them almost nothing to add it. There's no licensing. It's not out of the question that they could add that. So I think it'd be interesting. I think that there could be a version of this that moves toward 2110 because that's something that they're kind of pushing along. So having one with 1 or 2 Ethernets in it might make sense for them to do that, or even 4 Ethernets in there instead of HDMI. I think that's probably next year at the earliest, in my opinion. But I think that they will. I think they'll eventually update it, maybe by IBC or a little before IBC that's the next round that they would typically use to do that upgrade path. But things like MADI though would be, Blackmagic in the past has thrown things in just because they can. So if it's only going to increase the cost by production by a couple dollars, they may throw that in just as a flex.
Courtney?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see any updates the rest of this year because they're going to be busy trying to get those things out the door by July or whenever they promised them. They had so many announcements and so many upgrades over all the cameras and all the switches and all the hubs and everything else that and all the 2110 stuff. I don't think they're going to be going back. I think they're going to leave the existing ATEM Minis at a lower price point for a while because they did bump up the price considerably on the new G2 of the ATEM Mini Extreme. So I think they're going to keep the others around for a while rather than just obsolete them with new updates, especially with the unknown ability of the trade situation that the world is in right now and tariffs. Who knows what's going to happen there? I think they're going to kind of gird their loins for the next year or so and see what happens.
And from Times Square today, it's David Brady. Hello, sir.
Good morning. And I'm just curious about where they're placing those new little mini routers that they've introduced, and if they're looking to modularize, if that's even a word, some of their prosumer kind of line of stuff.
Guy?
Yeah, I'd love to see a couple things. One, in the ATEM Mini Pro line with the streaming, I'd love to be able to see SRT and H.265, HEVC. Now, there is a great interview that if you want some official answers, Aaron Parecki was able to catch up with Dan May in this video titled The Real Reason for Creating the ATEM Mini Extreme G2. And it's a pretty long interview where he goes into a lot of discussion that I wouldn't think that the president of Blackmagic USA would say on camera, and he does. So I'd suggest watching that to get a few clues. But yeah, recording, I'd love to see some kind of NVMe or something inside of an ATEM Mini Pro, but they've obviously got to do a lot of market research before they drop this thing, because they sold a ton of ATEM Minis. So to modify what that expectation is for the consumer, it's going to take a little bit of thinking. And, it might be some of the features like Super Source, or some of the pro features like dual outputs for the webcam outputs get brought down from the extremes down to the smaller lines. But that's the thing. They got to create that overwhelming value, because we're seeing this OC line, we're seeing Director Mini, we're seeing all these other things that can do NDI in. We know we'll probably never see NDI on a Blackmagic product, but who knows what that IP solution will be that goes in. Maybe it'll be a 2110 ATEM Mini G2. Who knows? It's all up to the powers that be.
Next question.
This one's from Fred Parr in Denver, Colorado. I'm going to Chile for a shoot in a few months. I'm bringing minimal lights, 2 300-watt lights, but need a robust power adapter for their outlets, type C and L. Suggestions?
Go ahead, Alex.
All you need to do is adapt. So there's two things. One is that you don't need to have any kind of the lights that you have there, depending on what the lights are. Most modern lights will handle the entire range of power. If you're doing an LED, it'll do 110 to 220. So you shouldn't have to make a conversion. If you do, it's going to be that's a lot more challenging. So if you're taking lights that are sensitive to power, I wouldn't do that. Like I would, if you're going to go in a few months, I would figure out what you're going to do that it's going to be able to cross the power input. But all the modern LED lights should be able to handle the full range of voltage that may be there. Then once you have that, you're simply adapting those. Now, if it depends on what kind of power supply you have. So if the power brick or the power that goes into your light is a standard C13 IEC cable, then all you have to, what I do typically when I go local is I take something with an adapter, and you can buy those adapters. It's just literally a plug adapter. Buy those, or you just get to the location, go to your local hardware store, and they'll typically have those cables on sale, and they'll be the right connection for the wall on one side and a C13 on the other. And that makes it a lot easier for you to just. I don't like having the adapters in the chain if I don't have to. So I have a lot of IEC cables from other countries. so the these C13s. So the C13s, of course, are the 3-prong that you're kind of used to putting into your computer and many other things. It's also why I tend to only buy monitors with a C13 input, is because then I know that when I go to some other country, I can just buy a bunch of new cables. They're $3 each or $8 each, and I just rig everything up with local connections.
Now, Alex, I'm going to ask a little follow-up to this, because you have a lot of international experience, especially with power. When you're dealing with dirty power that is either poorly grounded or there might be voltage fluctuations, do you ever bring anything as an intermediary to kind of clean it up before it gets into your gear?
Yeah. I mean, if you're going really minimal like this, I don't know what I would do. Typically, we take the 1500s, the APC 1500s. Now, I don't know how the laws have changed. I haven't had to go international for a little while now, so I don't know how the laws have changed. But typically, if we marked them on the cases that we had, and we took the batteries, the big thing about the 1510 is that you can take the 1500, not 1500. The APC 1500s, the battery comes out, and what you do is you pull it out and you flip it and put it back in, and that way the connections aren't live. So the connections stay are kind of isolated from the rest of the device, and chances of it catching fire is much lower. I don't know, again, whether you'd have to figure out how to put those batteries into a case or not. There are line conditioners as well that are much smaller. So they're much smaller little boxes that will condition the power that isn't a backup. But when we take full kits, we would take 4, 5, 6 of these APCs, flip their batteries, put them back in. There's a piece of paper that we have to give to TSA saying these are batteries and they follow your instructions and they're packed this way. And there's a bunch of things that had to happen there. But I know before COVID, at least, we were able to do that, without too much trouble. After COVID, and I know a lot of the rules with batteries have changed over time, so you have to kind of check that to make sure that it works. But there's also just straight line conditioners. They're little boxes that will, correct your signal your power signal as it goes in. So the best case scenario is often, especially if you have expensive stuff, is to, in some countries, we've chosen to never plug it. Like in some countries that I've worked at, we don't ever plug into the wall. Like we just have batteries. Like, and we we shoot with, kind of something, we haven't used jackeries overseas, but something like a jack. If you think of a jackery, we'll shoot, and if it's an interview for a half an hour, we have plenty of battery to run all these little LED lights in our camera and everything else. But we don't plug into the walls because in places that I've shot like Iraq, we haven't had enough confidence in the place, especially where we were going. We didn't have enough confidence in the power in the locations to plug into it.
And Fred, if you do end up going with the UPS route, just triple check that the UPS that you're buying can take the voltage in. Same thing as you're doing with a power adapter, making sure that it can take 110 to 220. Make sure that UPS can take it too.
That's a great point. Almost no UPSs can. This is the one thing. Almost no UPSs can do 110 to 220. So when you're going overseas, you're buying a 220. You're buying a UPS for that mission. And so, like in the old Pixel Core shelving, we'd have 20 or 30 ones that just had 220, written on them or posted on them, and then another shelf that said 110.
Your questions and votes drive the show, so remember you can use Makana to not only ask the questions, but also chat about them, vote on the questions. We have a lot of questions, and voting super important. If you don't have access, you can sign up at officehours.global/join, and then you'll get links on how to get into Makana, but also Discord, all the good stuff. So check it out. Next question.
From Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas, would you integrate this mic drop gizmo into your workflow to eliminate the times you have to cough or get rid of an awkward word?
Alexander?
I'm always impressed with Angry Audio. I don't own any of their products, but they look really cool. They have a lot of little boxes that solve a lot of problems. Of course, they also have gotten into the audio processing world. So I'll just show you what we're talking about here. So this is the mic drop gizmo. Cool thing, this is a flush table top mount solution here. I'd be curious to hear how much noise this little switch makes. By looking at it, I'd guess it probably makes less than a lot of the typical larger, chunkier buttons you tend to see on broadcast consoles. On the back, you've got XLR pass-through. If we actually look at the manual here, let me just go to here. So you have XLR pass-through. Now, like all Angry Audio products, these things use also the Studio Hub Plus wiring standard for getting audio, either balanced line level or mic level or AES-3 digital signals over standard Cat5, Cat6 wiring. In fact, even in the manual there, it's got the pinout wiring configuration. I can't remember who owned this standard, but a number of years back, that company who created this wiring standard went out of business and Angry Audio acquired them. So now all their products, including their consoles, use this wiring standard, which I know a lot of people have adopted. It is not an audio over IP solution. It is just for a direct pin wiring configuration for getting audio. But I would love to try one of these things and see if it's any good.
Good, Bill?
My answer is maybe, and here's why the maybe. I'm pretty specific about the things that I need some mic mute switches to do. When you buy a mic mute switch, if it's well designed, it's going to have at least 3 modes. It's going to have momentary push to talk, momentary push to mute, and locking talk or mute. The third is the most important to me. I need to be able to push a button and leave the mic on while I do something with my hands for a demo or something like that, and then the next time I push it, it's off. I also usually want some feedback. That looks like the button is tall enough to maybe give me tactile feedback, so it might work. If I could set up the mode correctly, if that happens, then the other question is always switching transients and whether or not it's well enough buffered so we're not going to get a click every time we push it. That is sometimes a little hard to find, and I've had to send back many of my mic boxes for a little reworking because over time they get a little noisy in that area. But the last thing I'll talk about is just training people to use them. And the thing that the scenario here, if you're just putting them on a table for other people to use, whether somebody has good technique in terms of I know when I'm muted, I know when I'm not muted, and you don't get that circumstance where you're talking to somebody across a table and I'm sorry, you're muted. I'm sorry you're muted, because they keep forgetting that they've muted themselves and they don't unmute themselves. So part of it is just the human interface training to teach people to know how to do it, which means that I think these are most useful for people who are doing them all the time and a little problematic for the guests. But if it's a good product, I'm all for it. $125, I think, is what I saw for the retail price on it. So that's reasonable and certainly something that I would investigate if I was doing an installation.
Courtney?
Yeah, I'm not real thrilled with the industrial design of it because of the way that they have it designed, the way the mute switch is right next to the XLR plug. So you got to mount this XLR plug flush in a table somewhere near the person who's going to hit it. So it's got to be near the mic. And if you're putting it at the base of a mic arm, which is what they're suggesting, a lot of times the mic arm is going to be put in the center of a table. It may be more than an arm's length, the base of the mic arm, where the plug would plug in to keep the cables off the table, would be more than an arm's length away from the person who has to hit it all the time. Also, visibility is going to be tough to see whether it's muted or unmuted from anywhere other than directly in front of it. Since once you plug the XLR cable in, it's going to block visibility to the button if there's any kind of visual cue on whether the button is muted or not muted. The other thing is it does require power, I assume, because they say it works with dynamic microphones and condenser microphones. And of course, if it's working with a dynamic mic, there's no power running from your console to this, so you have to run separate power to it. So you have to take all those things into consideration. And I think a movable box with a lit button that tells you the state of the mute is a better solution than something like this that mounts on a table, may be hard to see and maybe hard to reach.
Alex?
Yeah, it's funny. As we've had this discussion, I started designing what I want in my head, and I feel like we probably ought to all sit down and have a discussion about like what that would look like. But I think that having when I was thinking about it, it would be really cool to have the kind of the faceplate the way that you have here. To Courtney's point, I would never put the XLR on the top because it's sticking out, and there's a lot of configurations that don't want that. If you look at it from the side, what I'd probably do is have the XLRs on the back, going back, so they're two next to each other, going, kind of at a 90-degree angle or parallel with the top face. One of the things that I'd want to do is be able to, have that button. I really would like the buttons much closer to be ATEM style buttons, this kind of soft, will never make a noise kind of button instead of a little clicky button, or even the one that I have on the Model 205 I'm not thrilled with. Like, it's okay, but I have to push it on the corner if I don't want it to tap. I definitely want the button to light up. The distance isn't enough for me. Like, I want to be able to look over and see it's on or it's off, to make that actually happen. To Bill's thing, I'd love to have switches on the back that just let me say what this is actually going to be, or better, have something that can configure it. But it could have a little FPGA in there that could decide what it has. GPIOs, so that both in and out, so that I could basically, to Mickey's point, someone remotely could just flip that switch back on if it needs to. Like, so if suddenly I'm in a studio and I forgot to unmute, the engineer could just hit a button and it would just unmute that, force it open. But at the same time, what I want is to be able to, I'd love to have a little light next to my something, like a little light that's somewhere, next to it that would turn on if I'm muted or not muted, or have a little green or red or whatever, but it's getting the signal from that. And for the one that I just described, and then the idea is that you build that little plate with all that GAC in it, and then you can just drop that into a table. But it also, I would sell a case for it that you just slide it in and install it, and then it's just a case that sits on your desk, and you could build both of those together. So now I feel like I'm going to have to open up SketchUp and build a model, and then post it on LinkedIn and say, somebody should build this. So, by the way, I posted a thing about frame rates on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post more on LinkedIn. So I've decided on Wednesdays I'm just going to post something. And so there's my opinions about frame rate are up there. And there's a lot of people interacting if you're interested.
Yeah, and Paul, thanks for bringing up an excuse for us to talk about hardware mutes, because I know it's something that we're all super passionate about. And I was kind of on the search for how I wanted to mute myself for a while, because I wanted to just absolutely know I was off. The one, I know it's kind of prosumer, but the one that I ended up liking a lot was this power mute from Proco Audio. And what I wanted to show how they deal with Bill's point. They have they have a 9-volt battery slot, so you can not have it powered into a wall, but they also have little dip switches so that you can put it in continuous talk, continuous off, and then there was the little light here to tell you red or green. Problem with it, though, is this button is too way too clicky. So the only
That's
way that I've been
basically a
able to
stomp box for a musician.
It's the only way I've been able to use it is to put it on the floor and then put a witness camera on it so that my
Exactly.
switcher has a light for whether I'm on or off. But we'll check it out. Next question.
Next question is from Jeremy Murray in St. John, New Brunswick. I'm currently trying to create a countdown clock that is 3 minutes long in Apple Motion, and I'm struggling to get the numbers generator to give me a minute format. Is there a quick way to do this?
Go ahead, Alex.
There's a quick way, but it's not clean. I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. Like we've asked for this for years. Like, so for, since I started building countdown clocks in Motion, I asked for this feature that like, hey, can I have the time code and then just say what I want to show, and that hasn't been an option. So here's how I do it when I build these countdown clocks. So if you do an output, I'm going to go to a generator and go to text generator and go to time code. So you'll see that time code there. I'll go into the inspector. I have a thing about not only changing my text size in one place so that I know where it is. So we're going to increase that to there. Now I'm going to go back into my now there's a couple things that you have to do to make this actually work. So if I go into my back into my generator, the first thing I'm going to do is say turn off current time code, because otherwise I'm going to be stuck with whatever the current time code is. Now I can just set it to whatever I want, and so I'll set that. It does this weird thing with that because of the frame rate. Anyway, so now I have that set. This won't matter because you'll see in a second. And then what I can do is simply say this is that is a keyframe. I'll go to the other end and I'll set this to 0. And then that's also set at a keyframe. And so now I have my, it's begun, right? So now I have my time code. But to your point, it has all this extra gack to it. There's a couple things that you have to do to fix that. Number one is you need to set it to monospace. So monospace will keep it from, and then you also need to set it the alignment to left, and then you'll move it back over. So, and I use, when I do this, I go to the properties and I grab my X and I pull it back over to where I need it. And now you have, we'll go back into the generator. So now we have it. And what you'll find now is that the numbers don't vibrate like they did before. They'll move around because they're reordered based on the size of those. Now, the other thing you need to do then is your separators. Now you'll see that it is moving just a little bit, and that is kind of a font related problem. So I have a, and different fonts will react to monospacing in different ways. So if you go into, let's say, we'll just do this one here. Now it's way too wide, but what I can do is go take my tracking and pull it back together. That's there. And so now I have, now, and you'll see with this font, for instance, it works perfectly. Now, the next problem that you have is that you have these frames and these hours that you want to get rid of. And the way that I do that is to use a mask. So I'm going to grab the group specifically, and I'm going to say I want a rectangular mask, and I'm just going to draw it right around my countdown clock. And no, that is, yes, that's very kludgy. And we don't want it to be that way, but there's no way to turn those off. And it's so fast to build a countdown clock that way. Now, if you're only doing text like that, there's a lot of automatic countdown clocks that you can use. Everyone's like, I can just build a countdown clock there's like 1,000 web pages that do it, and there's a lot of tools that do it. When this gets interesting is when you start to really want to have control over it, make it 3D. Like I build most of the time I build very, very custom countdown clocks. And the reason I do that is because I like to do it. I find it to be visually pleasing, but it also is a production value that I add to to what I'm doing with for a client. And it's usually something because I know how to do it. And now you know how to do it, but because I'm one of the only people that know how to do really, really nice countdown clocks that stand above all the automatic ones. When clients go to somebody else and they have them do it, and they get a regular countdown clock, they're like, and they're like, can't you make it look like this, and this? And people are like, no, that countdown clock on the web doesn't do that, and or whatever their automatic countdown clock is doesn't do the things that I do, because once I'm in motion, I can do all kinds of things. I've got particle effects, I've got 3D, and I use all of those in my countdown clocks, and so that's why I got good at doing it this way.
And then as a result of this, the Alex Lindsay office hours, learn how to make a really great countdown clock. we started going down these weird roads. Like, okay, I want to put a vector image into motion, and you might have noticed the Easter egg that was in the middle of Alex's demo is that we had to make a custom font in order to put a vector, like to make it a glyph, and then you could extrude the SVG file the same way that you extruded the text. And that's how, like for the special shows when we were working on that countdown clock, we were able to do this same thing that Alex did, just with a little bit of extrusion, but we were able to get the logo to look really sharp.
Yeah. So those are the kind of things that, again, when you absolutely, there are plenty of ways of doing countdown clocks automatically, and you don't need to build them inside of a thing and have a video playback. But if you really want to turn the dial up and be competitive from a production value, it's not hard in motion to step above what everybody else can do with those countdown clocks. And it's not the thing that makes a difference. It's one of the little things that just makes it a little bit better when you're doing stuff for your clients.
And in a corporate environment, I was at a conference once and I saw somebody had a countdown clock where it was just like a website, but then the Google ads were coming down like it was a speaker who was doing it. And the Google ads came down on the side with whatever somebody else searched in the hotel, and it was kind of an embarrassing ad. So after the speech, I went up to him and was like, hey, could I take your countdown clock to another level? It'll take me 20 minutes, but I think I got an email back that was the most glowing things, like, you have no idea, this has totally changed how people perceive me, but people don't know what's possible until you show them.
Yeah.
Next question.
From the QR code, Jeremy Abro in Massachusetts. I live stream swimming indoors at fairly well-lit pools, currently using Sony ZV-1s, but would like to move to PTZ with hopefully a bigger sensor than ZV-1 and stay with Sony, looking for suggestions. 1080p is fine, at least 20x, zoom, HDMI, thank you.
Bill?
This is going to be largely a budget. How much do you have? Sony has a lot of cameras that would be great at doing this. For me, when I approach something like this, swimming happens over a long time, and you have a vertical plane that you have to track these swimmers as they're going back and forth. You also have the moments, the turns at each end of the pool, which are critical. So for me, I would always be thinking about, how do I cover all the moments in the race that are important in terms of who's ahead and who's not. We've all watched the Olympics, and they have those fabulous tracking cameras that roll down the side of the pool to keep even with the swimmers, so you can always see who's a hand held in front of the next one. That's a difficult thing to do in these kind of environments. Thankfully, you're on a big concrete base typically, so you're not going to have any problem with any kind of shake or things like that when you're out at the end of the zoom. But still, even for an operator to be able to automate this, if you're looking to do PTZ and have somebody be able to follow them, you're going to want a really good system. I mean, I would be thinking, if you want to do it really well, of the top end guys like Mark Roberts and things like that for the actual hardware to move the camera, because this is not going to be easy. You can certainly find rigs less expensive than that and get a decent job out of it. But boy, I hope whoever's running PTZ on this stuff has really good skills and was one of those great video gamer people, because this is a fast-moving, difficult thing, and you're going to want a good crew behind you. That's my 2 cents.
Guy?
Yeah, Bill nailed it. I frequently will run for PTZs, and that's in corporate. And I still have it's a hard time trying to follow people on stage and switch cameras, and then know all your presets and where they're going to be and where they're going to go. Now, if you're used to doing these kinds of matches, and you go back and you look at the Olympics, and we see these shots, some of these guys, unless you know where they're going to go, you might be better off just having static cameras and cutting more cameras versus trying to follow these guys, because a wide shot where you can just cut to, and then some man cameras to pick up the people, because the people picking up the shots will be faster than you can with your PTZ. So unless you know the rhythm exactly of where they're going to go, and then you can just develop a cadence and nail it. But yeah, the price for a 1-inch CCD or sensor size camera like the Sony AM7 is going to set you back $12,000. And if you need a couple of those, really, again, what's the point of trying to have 4 of those? You're up to $48,000. You can buy some of the older models like the X1000. You could find the Sony X1000 is a 1-inch CCD model, and plenty of guys around town here in Seattle have those older models, and they still compare with the present day look of even a UE150 or UE160. So you could pick those up on eBay for like $4,000. So, but 4,000 times 4, you're in at $16,000. Like, really, where do you draw the line between trying to to keep up, because you start to go into FR7 territory if you want really the latest and greatest in fixed lens, and now all of a sudden you have to buy the lens on top of the camera, and you're just into a whole nother world. And then as you see in these images, the camera's, as Bill said, underwater, and it's going along. So taking clues from what the professionals are doing will give you more insight as to what would be the best for a viewer. But I don't know if you want to go to that length. It's a lot of money.
Alex?
A couple of things. One thing is that I don't know what the onboarding process is, but Harvard, we had the head of sports coverage at Harvard on our show, and you can go back and look at that in the past show. But I believe they take on volunteers and students and so on and so forth to do a lot of the work. And given that you're focused on something, they may be interested in having you, be part of that team if you talk to them about it, because it's they cover all of them. They do hundreds of streams, and you may learn a lot by just seeing what they're doing, because they've been doing it for years. So I don't know where you are in Massachusetts, but if you're in Boston, it may be something that worth having at least a conversation with them about it. But what I would say is that I agree with what everybody said before. You may want to look at smaller. I mean, obviously, it'd be great to have large sensor, but large sensor and 20x zoom don't go together very well. And the reason for that is, as you increase that focal length, your focus distance, your gets really, really small. And 20x on a full frame sensor is going to be like a half an inch of focus, depending on what your aperture is. And inside, even if it's well lit, I don't know. I mean, unless you're outside, it's going to be problematic. So I think that you may want to be thinking about some of the smaller cameras. Also think about some of the smaller Canon cameras, the CN 5, I think they're 500s that are there. Those are $5,000 and pretty great cameras as well, and relatively large sensors. So there's a couple options there that might save you a little bit of money too.
And if you're curious to look back at that conversation, it was about a year ago. Look up Ivy League Sports with Irmi Halevi from Harvard. It was a really great show. Mickey
Incredible
in the chat.
second hour. Yeah.
Incredible second hour. Mickey chimed in and also mentioned, don't be focused on the Super 35 if you're doing really long throws, because you're going to have to deal with your depth of field. And also SDI runs are going to be super important as you're getting to longer and longer, more complex things. Maybe it's time to step up. You can ask questions 24/7 at askofficehours.global. That's fast and easy. All you need to do is just go to askofficehours.global. There's nothing to sign up for, nothing to log into. Just put in your name, put in your question. Askofficehours.global will get you in the next few days. Next question.
Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas. Which mixer would be best for a small community radio station, the Flex or the newly released Rave?
Alexander?
So this is, again, we're talking Angry Audio products here, so just let's have a look and see what Paul's talking about. It is these. So these are the two analog. Now, these are analog mixers. So this is the Flex and the Rave, and there's some differences with the I/O here. In general, nowadays, I would not suggest a analog console. Even in smaller radio stations, most people now are, if they haven't already upgraded, they're gutting their radio stations and now replacing them all with digital. For a little bit more money, and again, a little more investment, you would get much better results from something like one of these Telos Axia consoles. And you can get them in various formats here. Like, this is one of their smaller broadcast consoles. And the cool thing about this is essentially the DSP mixing engines, a digital mixer. The DSP mixing engine and the I/O is actually in a 1U rack mount box. And so there's just simply an Ethernet cable that connects to this console. This console is basically a control surface for this. So you get your metering and all your controls here, and you get a nice OLED screen here with your clock, and you can get these in different sizes. But for a little bit more money, I would suggest looking at something like this. Telos is not the only game in town, but they make really good stuff, and they're reasonable, and there's just so much more flexibility with a digital console. Now, I would want processing, because with a digital console, you can create artist presets. Each DJ at the radio station can have their own mic preset, and you can fine-tune stuff for the talent. You just can't do that with analog. It's a lot harder.
Courtney?
Well, I kind of go the other direction. I think due to the fact that this is a community-based radio station, you're going to be operating mostly with volunteer staff, and they may not be high. If you've ever tried to configure one of those Telos consoles, I remember when Leo got some in at the Twit network. They had the guy that was the product manager for Telos there for about a week and a half to try and get it configured to work right with all the mixed minuses and everything. The difference between these two consoles is if you're just looking at these two analog consoles, the Flex just has 4 more line inputs, and the rest of the functions are the same. They both have four mic preamps, and then the rest are line inputs. The Flex, which is the bigger one, it cost $1,000 more than the Rave, which is kind of a pared down version. And the idea behind these analog radio consoles is the simplicity involved. There's very few buttons on the front that you can hit and go crazy and suddenly take yourself off the air. So the other only difference that I can find is there's a USB interface on the more expensive one, which is the Flex, which has a few more inputs. But the rest of them seem to be, the same number of monitoring mixed minus outputs, headphone monitoring outputs between the two of them. You just pay about $1,000 more for the Flex to get those 4 extra line inputs and a USB interface. Seems to be the only difference between the two. But if you buy the more expensive one, you won't have to regret buying the small one and move up later.
Next question.
This is a QR code question coming from Roger Martin in Tonto Basin, Arizona. When you show all participants with the background and the boxes, is that done by Zoom Tiles, or do you use your switching software?
Guy?
Yeah, for this show in the morning, this is an ATEM constellation where super sources are being utilized to create this kind of look where you've got all the participants that are selected, and then you've got the background back there. For shows like Extra Hours, we're using a different platform. We're using Viz, but again, it's software. The background's back there, and then it's whatever the TD wants to pick. They have their multi-box looks, and they can just populate those boxes based on who they want to go inside of them. Alex can probably give us a little bit more detail as to how Isadora and the back end works with a multi-viewer to pump.
Yeah, so I mean, ours is a little different. So when you're talking about tiles themselves, in tiles, you would put the background in tiles, and I believe that can be animated, or I don't think it can be a live one, and I don't think that it'll do tiles, and I'm not sure, but I don't think tiles will do an alpha output, which would be kind of cool, for that probably a feature request there. But typically, if you're using tiles, that's the case. If you're looking at our tiles, what happens is that we all have IDs for us as as panelists. Those IDs are being able to be seen by the system. Mukana actually delivers who's where and who's answering the question and so on and so forth to Isadora. Isadora then knows what those are when it's being requested. So when the TD says, show me the super source, they don't have to put somebody in every box. It simply grabs the people based on those ID numbers. It sends that information to the ATEM. And it puts all that, and that's a very simplified version of what happens. But the ATEM is just following instructions. It's being told that by Mixeffect. Mixeffect is getting the OSC commands from Isadora. Isadora is getting the raw data from Mukana, and the interface is Universe. so our version of this is a kind of a convoluted but very powerful tool that the development team has put together to make this work.
Coming up on Office Hours, we've got our live-only shows over the weekend, so check that out. You got to be in Makana to see them, so officehours.global/join if you need to get in there. Saturday's our regular Q&A show, just not put on YouTube after the fact. And then Sunday is our introspection show. It's where we chew on the more philosophical topics, some of the industry, whether about the industry, about Office Hours, you name it. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't been there, check it out on the weekend. Next question.
Brett in Western Australia. What software does the panel use or recommend for mic EQ, compression, de-essing, etc.?
Go ahead, Bill.
So I've evolved tremendously. Once upon a time when I was in radio, we had hardware things, and you put a certain amount of compression on your voice, and you put a certain amount of limiting and whatever else you needed to do, maybe some other knob that you turned up a little. Boy, has that gone away. And the first thing that really surprised me when I got here into Office Hours was in rapid succession, every single processing stage I had on from my microphone into my recorder went away. I just took them all out of there because we realized that starting with an absolutely clean signal with no effect and getting that right, getting it so that it's picking up things without any additional noise or problems or hums or whatever, is always stage one. Once you get to that clean signal, then you can start thinking about processing in post. And I always heard people saying less is more and less is more, and I never really understood it until I was on the phone or on a call once with Mickey, and we're trying to figure out for my audiobooks what we're going to do with my voice. And when he showed me his approach to it, I was shocked, because one of the things that I never understood about really good audio engineers is that they tend not to just turn something on and set a level on it. When he was telling me that in the early part of the stage, I'm going to put a little compression here because I want to lower the dynamic range, but very, very little. And then he had a couple of other stages in between. Then he would listen to that signal, and maybe at that point it needed a little more compression with a second instance. He was really sculpting sound in the same way that a fine chef would sculpt flavors. He would get the original thing and decide whether it was too salty or not salty enough. And if it was too salty to begin with, he'd add a lot less later on. And it really changed my entire thinking about EQing audio. And that less is more thing, less is more as long as you know what you're trying to get to and have the ears to follow the chain along the way. It was revolutionary for me to think about audio processing that way. And I'm very thankful for Mickey and all the people that I've listened to on this show over the course of the last 3 years to help me understand that a light touch is the best touch.
Alexander?
There's too many to recommend. Before I recommend specific preferences, generally what I always tell somebody, if they're just kind of getting started, assuming we're talking for post-production here, or music production really, I always tell people, instead of just spending tons of money on plugins, train your ears and learn and understand how the functions of EQ and compression and de-essing work. So just remember, no matter what digital audio workstation you're using, or even if you're editing video in a nonlinear editor, they all these days have very powerful built-in tools. They give you all of this essential stuff. All of the dynamics processing is going to be in there. I would use that stuff that's in the box because you can get perfectly fine results as long as you know what you're doing with EQ and compression. So once you figure out how that works, then you can start testing the waters with different plugins. And sure, a lot of plugins from third parties will get you better results. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're doing music production, do you like the sound of a LA2A opto compressor on a vocal? I mean, we start to get into a lot of different specific preferences for sonic palette here. So I don't know exactly, Brett, what you're doing, if it's music production or some other type of production work. So my suggestions are going to vary depending on what you're going to be doing. So maybe you can also post another question and let us know exactly what you're trying to do.
Courtney?
Well, Brett, I'm in the school that Bill is in. I go less is better. I'm using the Rodecaster Pro 2, which, of course, as you know, has all kinds of this affix processing. And they have this simplified version. If you turn the processing on, you can add depth or sparkle or punch, which is basically compression and filtration and de-essing, those kind of things. I have all the processing turned off because I'm using the noise reduction that Zoom uses. And on this panel, we're all going into Zoom, and Zoom does its own modifications to the audio in a number of ways. If you have for musicians, sound audio for musicians turned on, it doesn't modify it. But if you're in the normal range with that turned off, or with personalized audio turned on, which I have, it does tailored noise reduction, which samples the quality of your voice. And any type of compression or modifications to that signal before it goes to Zoom is probably going to mess up that noise cancellation to some degree. And I found I turned that Aphex, those Aphex patented noise filters to modify the sound, the big bottom and the vocal stressor and all of those, make my voice sound a little more artificial. I like the clean, unadulterated version with a little noise suppression.
And go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, and Brett actually just commented it. He said actually specifically it is for live production, does a lot of Zoom meetings. So just a couple things. So if you're doing stuff for clients, sometimes, if you're in a room that has bad audio, you probably are going to need some kind of broadband noise reduction processing, and there's no DAW that I know that ships with one that's really, really good. One that I've been very impressed with, if you go to waves.com and look at the Clarity line of plugins, they have one called, I think it's called CVox, and it is really, really good at separating human speech from actual background noise, even in extreme conditions with very, very little artifacts. Having somebody, say, do an interview where they're standing on a street and there's traffic and cars driving by. It does a pretty impressive job. On the much more expensive end, the Isotope suite, the RX suite of software, they have the standard and advanced series. There is a module in there for noise reduction as well, and de-esser and de-plosive and de-verb and all that sort of stuff. But the RX suite is pretty expensive, so you may want to look at Waves. They also have both perpetual and subscription plans, but I think if you I'm paying for the Platinum bundle right now, and I'm paying, $30 a month, and I get several hundred plugins in their library, so you have no shortage of options there. So those are some places you can look at.
And just to underline something that Courtney touched on when he was answering the question, if you are using some sort of software noise reduction or compression downstream from whatever your mixer is or whatever, so if you're using Zoom's built-in noise reduction after whatever your other thing that's applying the signal processing, you want to turn that stuff off before it gets to Zoom, because Zoom is expecting just a naked signal, and if you already have an affected signal, then Zoom is going to end up with some artifacting because it's trying to, they're going to bump up and have collisions with one another. So just something to be on the lookout for is really think about your whole chain and make sure that you're not double processing at some point. Next question.
This one's from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota, USA. What's your go-to clock app for production?
Go ahead, Alex.
It depends. So for my iPad, I don't have a way to show this right now, but for my iPad, I use a thing called Atomic Clock by Goring. There's a lot of atomic clocks on the phone. Goring is the one that, and CJ's showing it right now. So that one. Now, I admit there's different configurations, and that is not the configuration I use because when that little second thing goes around, it makes me very nervous. So I, like when I'm doing a show, I don't want to see anything move that fast. And so, but there's another version of that where it kind of does it slower. Anyway, so so that's one for the iPad. Something that looks very similar to that is what's called Studio Clock. And this is on the Mac. So I have Studio Clock on the Mac that looks, these are all takes of the BBC clock. So that's there. And then the final one, when we've been playing with, when we need something with more control, is one called stagetimer.io. So those are the three clock tools that I've been using for different shows.
Guy?
Yeah, stagetimer.io, as Alex had mentioned, is the one that we like. It's basically browser-based, and you can set up different cues. So like right now, this one's set on time, so it's displaying in the browser window that anybody in the world could see. So this is the one that says time. So this is your input, and this is your output, essentially. So now if we go over to this breakout starting in 60 and we hit that, now you can see that the breakout started and it counts down. So the viewers, everybody, if you're doing remote production or on site, you could have this as on a downstream monitor. It's nice because as it moves along, these colors change. So as you get down to the yellow and the red, you know that, and you could have it flash, and you could have it do different things. There's all kinds of little things that you could do. You could do a blackout, or you could do, here's the flash one. So you could let people know, hey, we only got like 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever you want to do to get in front of somebody. And you can put little messages. That's what I like. If somebody's, if there's some kind of production issue and they don't have in-ears, you can flash a message to them on a downstage monitor. Or if they're in Zoom and you put it as one of your participants, you can flash a message that way too. So very handy.
Alexander?
Yeah, and I too use the same iOS atomic clock app that Alex mentioned. I also use in a browser. I like this one, from Doug Johnson Productions. It's free. He's got this free atomic clock thing with a lot of configuration options. So if you click on the webpage here, you can set your time zone. You could have it in 24-hour format, which is what I like. You can change colors. And then actually he has a lot of advanced parameters as well that you can select. So you can actually change the design. I've got it set to, I think this is Helvetica. Anyways, you can change the font and you can change the size. You can just use the up and down arrows in your browser and you can make it bigger and smaller. So that's a cool little free option. I also use another, I think they have a paid version as well, but I also use another app on my Mac called On Time. And that thing has like show timers, but that's like more for like run of show. But just it's cool to have like an actual clock there for the talent. I put it up on a screen so they can kind of keep track of if they're going over time on the show.
And one of the keys with any of these apps is if it's whether it's in the web or in an app, you need to make sure that their source of truth is compensating for whatever latency is getting back to the individual devices, so that if you have the clock in multiple places, that people aren't out of sync. So make sure that if you're experimenting with all these, do some testing and make sure that everything's all copacetic. There are a couple ways to help. If you're enjoying Office Hours, find it valuable, you can like and subscribe to the channel. You can also volunteer. We have a lot of opportunities both on and off the show at officehours.global/volunteer, and there's officehours.global/donate, where you can contribute financially to helping the show keep running. Just head over to officehours.global/donate. We appreciate all the support. Next question.
Archie Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, USA, is asking, if someone is seeking to start up a podcast, can you outline the process in which one does so in 2025, a PC method and a Mac method, please?
Alex?
Yeah, I'll do something more general. So I guess the thing to think about, Harshid, and you can tell me what your specific questions are, is number one is, are you having remote guests? Are you doing it all in the same room? Are you, how are you doing that podcast? So that's one thing to start thinking about, because it really drives a lot of things. There's things that I would do on a computer, like if I'm bringing people in, I'm recording those on a computer. If they're all in the same place, I'm using a recorder. like I'm just going to use a recorder and hit record. If I'm trying to live stream it, that's a whole different thing to think about there. So those change the process there. The other thing you want to think about is, what outlets do you want to send it out to? In general, it's an RSS feed, but how are you, for instance, if you want to send something out to Apple Podcasts, there are about 20 styles of images that you need to generate. And you want to think about that ahead of time. When you build your logo, ask me how I know, don't build it with a complicated situation where you have to have a bunch of stuff that's integrated with the logo, because it makes making all those images really complicated. So you want to kind of think about where, what that looks like. Of course, you'll generate the RSS feed. Where you're going to keep the RSS feed. Some things will, like Squarespace and Substack, will manage that RSS feed for you, or you may want to do it yourself. Then I would say that the two hot places to look for podcasting right now is YouTube and Substack. So YouTube, of course, is pushing very hard down it. I think that in many ways, Spotify is maybe, but I think that Spotify is very like, you're really big or no one's listening to you. And I think Apple podcasting, you really have to know how you're going to promote your own podcast. You're not going to get any help from Apple. So there, there's not any social graph or anything else that's going to help. YouTube, and what YouTube and Substack do is they do a lot of like telling your friends that something's happening, and allowing kind of a cross-pollination that's probably a little bit more powerful than some of the other solutions. So those are some of the things to think about. It's not really a Mac or PC solution, but it's something we're thinking about really hard. We're moving Michael Krasny's show to Substack over the next couple months. And so we're thinking really hard about, all of these things at the moment. Once we get it off the ground and move it over in July, we will talk more about how we did it and our process and our approach to hopefully let other people learn from our scrapes.
Next question.
Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas. The Web Summit Vancouver, May 27 to 30th, is using the Bloomerang volunteer app to manage volunteers in South by Southwest. Has used volunteers effectively for years. How do you attract and effectively use volunteers?
Courtney?
Well, I've seen this with SMPTE, which I've volunteered for their shows and seminars. that they have, which are fairly expensive seminars to attend. And how you attract volunteers is you offer them a free pass to the seminar if they volunteer a certain number of hours to staff, taking names, checking people in, etc. On the seminars. Also, provide them with a meal. That's another way to attract volunteers. You can give them a meal and offer them a free pass to one of the seminars. This Bloomerang looks like a good piece of software to organize such a thing, because it can get quite complex if you have a multi-day seminar and you're looking for volunteers. This has a web-based interface and a app that runs on a phone to organize your calendar and seminar times along with each of your volunteers, so they can keep their own personal calendar of the sessions that they volunteered to help staff. And that stuff can be a moving target because, as you know, because volunteers can get flaky at times. So you always want to have enough backup volunteers in line to step in if somebody suddenly has a conflict or wants to attend one of the sessions that overlaps one that they've been volunteering to assist on. So the Bloomerang apparently I don't know how much it costs, but you could just organize this in Google Calendar with several people having access to the calendar and set up a complex session. But this looks like a pretty decent piece of software to organize all that stuff and keep everybody in line. But offer free attendance, especially some of these seminars can cost $3,000 or $4,000. So it's especially if people are interested in it and take an interest in the subject of the seminar.
Next question.
This one's another QR code question from Jeff Flukiger in Elkhorn. Alex mentioned something last week on MacBreak about DJing songs on TikTok. How could one do this without any copyright infringement?
Alex?
You can't. You can't do it without copyright infringement. You are going to infringe. The question that most people have is, how are you going to do it with anyone shutting you down? And it appears from the observations that a lot of us are making is that TikTok is not enforcing, or they've either licensed general licenses or they're not enforcing any kind of takedown based on and people are just doing it. So there's, and it's become quite a thing. If you go on TikTok and you go into the live area, it started where TV hosts and radio hosts would just put TikTok like off to the corner and then they just do their show. So that's how it began. And you could hear the music there and they're playing and you'd actually hear their feed going into it over their video. And that was just how they, it was kind of fun to watch when you look at like a morning show host doing it, where you see them talking to you and looking at you and then looking at their papers, and then they get up and they do their broadcast and then they go back and talking to you. And it was a really cool view. But then what then shifted was people said, hey, I could do that. I used to be a radio DJ, or I wasn't a DJ. I just want to play music. And so dance music and then radio DJs. And now there are Gen X, we're in radio for 20 years playing songs on TikTok. And it's just like a radio. It literally, they treat it like a radio show, except it's kind of dull to watch in between because you just see them kind of nodding back and forth. They're not really doing a lot when the songs are playing, but it is like listening to a radio station, but just on TikTok. I think it's a pretty interesting thing, and I may experiment with it. We'll see.
What'll be really interesting is as some of these folks get a following and get people who subscribe to them and want to see all of theirs, then how does the musicians reach back and say, okay, how can I leverage your audience to try and listen to our stuff?
Yeah, and I think that there's, I've always thought that they should put DJing, like live DJing, into Apple Music and Spotify, where they basically, I can DJ, but when I hit play on the song, it's playing to the users all from the system, not me. I'm not infringing. I'm talking. I'm a DJ. You can listen to me live, but when I play, it plays the song from the system. Or if I play the song from the system, it IDs it and gives them credit for it, that people are listening to that song one way or the other. Because if only Apple owned Shazam. Oh wait, they do. So they could very quickly, ID the song, give them credit for a play, and then what that would mean is a really popular DJ is actually spreading the wealth to anybody listening to it. So if you've got 100,000 listeners listening to something, if you're really good at it, they get 100,000 plays that would go back to the artist, as opposed to and and exposure. So being able to tie those back together and pay the artists that are inside the system would be, I think, a really interesting puzzle. And then people could leave it on, and it would be basically, and then, like if you, there's a lot of it, but theoretically, if you could do it without commercials or without very many, you could just do it because you love to do it, get a big following. And radio, I think, without commercials is really compelling. So I think just ask XM, so I think that that could be another way to kind of go down that path.
There you go. Got to be here till the end to get those juicy nuggets of new business models. Go get them. Thank you to the producers so much for asking the great questions today. Every single day you show up and, give us a new world to expand into and think about, which is great. And speaking of people expanding my brain, thank you to the panel for being here. It's every Friday getting to spend an hour getting a little bit smarter. I mean, some days like today, it's a lot smarter, which is awesome. So thank you for being here and sharing your life experience. And finally, thank you to the back-end crew. You work all the time to keep us organized, keep the show moving forward, keeping it running, keeping us looking and sounding good. Can't do it without you. Tlaloc Traversal today, 26,000 miles. That's 41,000 kilometers, 203 million bananas for scale. All right, we'll see you in after hours. Alex, I got to say, the reason that I like the fast dots is because for whatever reason, it helps me internalize the rhythm of a second. So I can look away from the clock and still hit a mark.
Yeah, and I guess I do it. It's the one with a little one on the inside makes me nervous. There's another one where it goes all the way around and it just keeps on going all the way around. So it's the outside dots will go all the way around and not the inside one. When the inside one's races like that, so there's one where they all light up and then they close and they all light up and then they close. Yep. I like that one. That's what I use. You can see it on, you can see, and I like that. I like, to your point, I like the rhythm. If for some reason it feels like time is slower. Yeah. It's a funny thing. It's funny, your and so, but the little one running around makes me I don't know why, but it makes me really stressed.